In a quiet, sunlit classroom at Jefferson High, the atmosphere was calm, almost routine. Students moved slowly to their desks as the bell echoed through the hallways, signaling the start of another period. Backpacks rustled, chairs creaked, and the low hum of conversation faded as Mr. Thompson, the math teacher, stepped to the front of the room. The whiteboard behind him was filled with freshly written equations, and a half-finished cup of coffee sat on the desk. Mr. Thompson, a man known for his sharp tongue and subtle favoritism, clapped his hands once to get everyone's attention. "All right, class, settle down," he said with a commanding tone. "Today, we're covering quadratic equations. Let's see who's ready." His eyes scanned the room before landing on Jasmine, a confident black girl seated in the second row. She was always attentive, always prepared, and had scored among the highest in the class on every recent test. "Jasmine, why don't you come solve this on the board?" he asked, his voice holding a faint edge that no one could quite place. Jasmine nodded calmly. "Sure, Mr. Thompson," she replied without hesitation. She rose from her seat, her footsteps steady as she walked toward the board. The room was silent except for the squeak of the marker cap as she removed it and began writing. All eyes followed her movements. She wrote clearly, methodically, thinking through each step. But barely a moment passed before Mr. Thompson interrupted, leaning back with a smirk. That's not quite right," he said, his tone laced with mockery. Then came the words that changed everything. "You know, Jasmine, maybe math just isn't for everyone. You should focus on something easier, maybe art or gym." A few students let out nervous chuckles, the kind of laugh that comes not from amusement, but discomfort. A low, drawn-out "ooh" spread through the room as heads turned toward Jasmine. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The air seemed heavier. No one spoke openly, but every student could feel the weight of what had just been said. Mr. Thompson leaned back, almost satisfied, as if his comment was simply a joke. Nothing serious. But Jasmine stood still, her marker frozen mid-air. Her posture was calm, but inside, her mind raced. She knew what had just happened. She knew that her intelligence had just been questioned, not because of her performance, but because of who she was. She could hear the silence of her classmates, the unspoken agreement that this was wrong. And yet, she didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. She didn't hang her head. In that moment, she took a slow breath and turned to face the room. The laughter stopped. The tension remained. But Jasmine didn't back down. Something had shifted, and though no one realized it yet, that moment would mark the beginning of something much bigger than just a math lesson. The silence in the room deepened as Jasmine slowly turned to face her teacher, her expression calm but firm. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, are you saying I can't do math because I'm a girl? Or because I'm black?" The question hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, landing with a force that caught everyone off guard. The class collectively held its breath. Mr. Thompson blinked, momentarily stunned. His confident posture faltered, and the smirk that had lingered on his face faded. I didn't mean it like that," he stammered, clearly caught off balance. "It's just that some students struggle more than others, that's all." But his words did little to soften the blow or hide the bias. His tone had shifted from sarcastic to defensive, but the damage had already been done. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were steady, and her presence commanded the room. "I got the highest grade on the last test," she said, looking him directly in the eyes. "Why are you only calling me out?" There was a sharp intake of breath somewhere in the back. A wave of realization spread through the students as they started piecing things together. Gasps and murmurs rippled across the classroom. A few students, who had always suspected this subtle unfairness, now saw it clearly, laid bare under fluorescent lights, an uncomfortable truth. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, and something unspoken began to unite them. A quiet sense that Jasmine wasn't just standing up for herself. She was speaking something they had all noticed, but never had the courage to say. In the middle of the second row, a student leaned over to whisper to her neighbor, "She's actually smarter than half the class." It wasn't said with surprise, it was said with certainty. Because it was true. For months, they had watched Jasmine raise her hand, only to be overlooked. They had seen her assignments come back marked harsher than others. They'd heard the way Mr. Thompson's voice changed when he spoke to her compared to other students. Less encouraging, more dismissive. And now, with one bold question, she had pulled all of that into the open. Mr. Thompson opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. For the first time, he looked uncertain. He looked around and noticed the eyes of the class on him, not with respect, but with scrutiny. The power dynamic had shifted. Jasmine hadn't just defended herself, she had exposed a pattern. The weight of his own words, now reflected back at him through the quiet resistance of his students, seemed to settle on his shoulders. And Jasmine, still standing at the front of the room, remained steady, unshaken, unapologetic, and more powerful than ever. The classroom remained frozen in silence, the tension thick and unmoving, as Jasmine stood at the front, her eyes unwavering. Her voice was firm, unshaken by the earlier exchange. "You can keep doubting me, but I know my worth," she said, the words clear and deliberate. "And I'm not going to let you or anyone else talk down to me again." Her tone wasn't angry. It was empowered. Her words didn't just echo in the room. They settled in the minds of every student present, carrying a weight that couldn't be ignored. Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if searching for a way out, but there wasn't one. The control he once held had slipped away, and no matter how he tried to redirect the class back to the lesson, no one was truly listening anymore. The equations on the board meant nothing now. What had just unfolded in front of them was bigger than math. It was about respect, dignity, and truth. Word of the confrontation spread quickly, faster than even Mr. Thompson could anticipate. A few students shared what they had witnessed with others. By lunchtime, the story had traveled through the halls, passed from locker to locker, retold at every table in the cafeteria. Students who barely knew Jasmine spoke of her bravery, how she had stood her ground with grace and strength. By the end of the day, someone had posted a short video clip from their phone online, capturing the moment she asked the question that no one had dared to ask. Comments poured in, some shocked, many supportive. Parents began to take notice. Emails were sent, calls were made. The incident couldn't be brushed aside or hidden behind vague apologies. Within 2 days, the principal called Jasmine into her office. The mood was serious, but not hostile. The principal looked her in the eyes, her tone sincere. "Thank you for standing up," she said quietly. "No student should feel humiliated in the classroom, especially by a teacher." Jasmine nodded, still composed, though the weight of everything was beginning to sink in. She hadn't planned to become the center of a controversy. She had simply spoken the truth, refusing to let herself be diminished. But that truth had ignited something far greater, a collective demand for fairness and accountability. A petition began circulating among students and parents, calling for the school to investigate the teacher's conduct. Signatures grew by the hour. Meetings were scheduled. Voices, once silent, began to speak. What Jasmine had started wasn't just a personal defense. It had become a turning point for the school itself. Policies were reviewed. Training sessions for teachers were discussed. And through it all, Jasmine remained calm, not seeking attention, but refusing to be silenced. Her strength had revealed a hidden truth, and now the school could no longer look away. The moment she stood up wasn't just about correcting a teacher. It was about rewriting the rules of who gets to be heard and who gets to lead. A month later, Jefferson High saw real change. Mr. Thompson was replaced, and the school introduced new training for teachers on unconscious bias and respectful communication. The shift was more than procedural. It was cultural. Jasmine, once quietly targeted, now stood confidently at a school assembly, addressing hundreds. Her words echoed with strength. When someone tries to tell you you're not smart enough, prove them wrong, not with anger, but with excellence. The students erupted in cheers, chanting her name with pride. Jasmine had become more than a student. She was a voice, a leader. She wasn't the wrong girl to bully. She was the right one to lead,